City Council. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly, Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez is not present. Councilmember Sneddon is not present. Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon?
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
Councilmember Jordan is not present, and Mayor Rouse.
Here, thank you. And would you read the item, please?
Certainly. Item 1, fiscal year 2023, recommended operating and capital budget.
Okey doke. Please proceed.
I'm going to start us off and then pretty quickly turn it over to Monday Fitzgerald. Monday, would you advance it? Thank you. So I wanted to start with a mission statement to emphasize a couple of things. The first is the first sentence. While we have a duty to provide independent legal representation, we are part of the city team. And that's really critical because the collaboration we have with the departments is what makes us successful. We don't produce goods or services directly. We're a support department. And for reasons you'll see later on in the presentation, that's really critically important. Now I want to turn it over to our law practice administrator, Monday Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Kalan. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Monday Fitzgerald. I'm the law practice administrator at the City Attorney's Office. I started with the city in 2016 at the City Clerk's Office, and then started at the City Attorney's Office in 2018, and started my new role as law practice administrator just this year. This is our agenda for today. We'll begin with the department overview and organization. The city attorney authorized positions. We have 16.75 total FTEs, which are comprised of 8.75 attorneys, 7 support and administrative staff, and 1 investigator. Our office is currently operating on 15 FTEs. Our office has 4 program areas: administration, advisory, civil litigation, and code enforcement. I have listed staff under their primary areas, but these programs are not silos. Many staff cover multiple programs. This crossover allows for collaboration and flexibility as the need arises. This slide is a breakdown of our FTEs by program based on our authorized positions of 16.75. We are continuing our plurality of effort in civil litigation. It can present a challenging situation to provide advice to all city departments, coupled with our duty to defend the city. Our budget of $4.4 million makes up just under 3% of the city's general fund. These are the amazing faces of the city attorney's office. We have a cohesive, focused, hardworking team who truly care about what they do. I'm proud to be a part of this dedicated team. In this chart, the 2 red boxes represent 2 vacant positions in our office. We expect in fiscal year 2023 that 1 attorney will be going from 1 FTE to 0.8 FTE, and another will be retiring. As a result of these changes, we are working with Public Works to overhire an attorney for the first half of the fiscal year. Budget overview. Revenues. Our revenue comes from cost recovery and settlements from civil litigation and prosecution. Our overhead allocation recovery represents funds from other departments to pay for city attorney services. The rest is a general fund subsidy to cover the remainder of expenses. The general fund subsidy adjustment will be broken down on the following slide. Expenditures. We have 2 adjustments. In salary and benefits, we have a $42,566 increase because of 2 promotions. In supplies and services, we have a $460,360 decrease, from cost savings of allocated funds for outside counsel on cases that are now closed. There's no change in allocated costs. A budget reduction of $29,577, which leaves us a balance of $4,401,712. Position changes. We have 2 internal equity reclassifications, the city attorney investigator and the litigation paralegal. These positions were underpaid in relation to other similarly skilled classifications. These positions are significant to our office efficiency and function. Departmental reductions. We have a target reduction of $29,577. We are keeping the vacant litigation paralegal position open to cover this reduction. The difference of $73,439 will be allocated to the assistant city attorney overhire. Service level impacts. We have 2 vacancies. Assistant city attorney at 0.75 FTE and the litigation paralegal at 1 FTE. This will create a 12% additional workload on our office and translates to almost 5 hours of additional workload a week per person. Ariel has asked me to be a leader in the office to deliver additional efficiencies needed to fill this 12% gap. And I turn the rest over to Ariel, program highlights and accomplishments.
Thanks, Monday. So going back to the council's budget work session, the council inquired, I think legitimately, why we had only 1 priority project. And at that time, I'd identified the sign ordinance. That's still there. In addition, Monday has taken on with IT, converting our workflow into an entirely electronic workflow. That saves us effort, but probably more importantly, it'll save the departments quite a bit of time and energy. Secondly, we've added a proposal to bring to the ordinance committee a land use appeal process streamlining. What may not be entirely apparent is that land use appeals to the city council automatically require anywhere from 10 to 30 hours of additional time for our office, and you can multiply that by a factor, I'm not sure what factor, but you can multiply that for community development. This would not mean eliminating the opportunity for the council to hear appeals. It would mean focusing appeals on the Planning Commission and providing the council the opportunity to hear appeals. The charter does require the council to provide that opportunity. I've consulted with the city administrator and mayor on this, and what I would propose is that we'll return to the ordinance committee with specific action proposals for detailed consideration. Next slide, please. Now, going back to the budget workshop, part of why we only have then 1 proposal and now 3, it goes back to that first slide and our collaboration as part of the city team. Much of what we do, really the vast majority of what we do, is in support of the departments that produce goods and services for the community. And that process, or that work, is inherently reactive. What we've tried to do to make it more predictable is work with the departments through a process I've described as collaborative legal budgeting, where we interview them in the fall, get a very detailed assessment of the work they intend to perform, most of which you've already heard in their budget presentations, and then collaboratively decide how to staff it. Sometimes it's with us, sometimes it's with special counsel. The point here is that the charter gives the city council and by delegation, the city administrator, the choice of how to address legal issues. We provide, I think, a very competitive and in most cases compelling option, but that's still a discussion to be had with the departments. So I want to talk about the specific accomplishments we've had over this fiscal year. The State Street Advisory Committee, while it's still in its nascent stages, it has required a tremendous amount of work from our office to get it up and running in support primarily of community development, but also in direct support of the committee members. The rent stabilization analysis that we started in December was a very significant project. From my standpoint, that was good work in the sense that I think it informed the council's debate, but it did take time, and I'm quite pleased with the results of what we produced. Enforcement of the just cause eviction ordinance is ongoing. I have invited Mr. Way and Mr. Alva here today to give you any specifics should you have questions. For my part, suffice it to say that that workload is growing, and it is our way of attempting to use the authority council added to the ordinance for our office to assist tenants where appropriate. The off-sale alcohol ordinance was enacted this year. That required a very large amount of time, and it's in the beginning stages of implementation, which I think you're going to hear about from the police department in a little while. Sidewalk vending was fulfilling a state mandate that needed to be fulfilled and has been kicked off to address primarily pushcart vendors. As the council knows, the Community Formation Commission, which I believe we're having a discussion about on June 7th, also took a tremendous amount of work, and I'm frankly proud of the work that Mr. Doimus did. The wireless facilities ordinance likewise involved tremendous civic engagement, and I believe that was well handled also. This year we've taken on another role that we have not taken on in the past, and that is direct labor relations negotiation, meaning Mr. Doimus is at the table during labor negotiations. That results in a direct cost savings because we're not paying outside counsel to do that work, and I hope it adds both credibility to our negotiating team and confidence to the city council's assessment of the negotiating team. The council's heard about the Black Gold Library System transition. That is a weekly affair for us at minimum, sometimes multiple times a week. We're supporting Ms. Caliente and the library through that relatively contentious process. Santa Barbara Clean Energy, Ms. Connect has spent an extraordinary amount of time working to help make that happen. Again, part of the collaborative work that we do. We heard community development Wednesday talking about SB 9. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Ms. Ostranger and Mr. Henschke really went above and beyond the call to make sure that happened on time. And from my standpoint, and I know from Ms. Bjork's, one of the things that we really strongly agree on is that getting things done in a timely way is the most efficient way to get them done. So we both made it a point to make that happen. Next slide, please. The council knows the electoral redistricting process came off very smoothly, and I think with a really excellent result. That took a tremendous amount of work. Our office led that project. I'm quite happy with that. Ms. Connect, working with Laura Doubles, really saved the Green Mobile Home Park. I think that's a deliverable we can all be proud of. We delivered the Mobile Home Park rent control, vacancy control ordinance, which I think is making a difference for real people. We helped save the El Zoco condominium, which had been under-maintained and underfunded for years. We were instrumental in the 701 North Milpas development agreement. Likewise, we helped draft in a very significant way the project development agreement for the Housing Authority project at the Coda commuter lot. The Coast Village Community Benefit District is coming to you for tabulation of the protest votes on June 7th. That has been work done in collaboration with Jason Harris. I've carried most of that myself. At the bottom of the list, but certainly not low in priority, is the Economic Recovery Extension and Transition Ordinance and the State Street Promenade enforcement. I wanted to end on those because they really segue into the highlights that I want to emphasize. For our office, one of the critical roles we can provide is frankly law enforcement. And this may be appropriate to say in the context of the police department budget. As we may have learned with the Cracky case, inconsistent law enforcement has its prices, has its costs. So the ability the council gave us about 4 years ago, actually 5 years ago, to create an in-house code enforcement and prosecution unit has been a tremendous addition to the organization. I believe that justice doesn't make sense unless it's applied equally and regularly. And that's what Mr. Way and Mr. Alva do. I think the council can be extraordinarily proud of that. I think that's an area that over time the city will want to emphasize. Looking at the highlights, again, out of code enforcement and prosecution, our devoted effort to protecting public spaces and neighborhood improvement has made a difference. I know that after 6 last night, Mr. Way was out on a site visit at a property that we've had continuing problems on. Mr. Way and Mr. Alva do that on a regular basis. There isn't a complaint that we receive that goes unanswered, and it's done in a highly timely way. We have recovered close to $300,000 from receiverships. That helps offset our costs. It's not a full cost recovery, but it's a substantial mitigation of the expense the city bears. And then lastly, the relatively brazen tree cutting that happened up on Paterna Road resulted in litigation that the council authorized. That case is still ongoing, but we've recovered an interim settlement of $200,000. Next slide, please. On our performance objectives, we're ahead of schedule in getting work done in a timely way. If there are complaints about timeliness, or if mid-course adjustments are necessary with the departments after our collaborative legal budgeting meetings, we've created an opportunity and conduct monthly meetings with each department where we really roundtable what's going on and coordinate. To my delight, I should say, the departments really value those meetings. And in many cases, the department heads are learning from their staff at the same time we do. So it's been a very constructive use of time. Our other measures are pretty obvious, and we're on track with them. Over time, I would like to improve these performance objectives to something that is less workload and more success-oriented. In other words, telling you how many memos we've done or how many cases we've handled is not particularly meaningful. I'd like to be able to have a quality assessment in there. And next slide, we do have that in a minimal way. On October 18th, we completed our SurveyMonkey customer service survey. Our last results were in the 4.3 out of 5 to 4.4 range. Our results this time were in the neighborhood of 4.5 out of 5. So our results have improved. I think that's good. I would be happy to discuss the details of those results in a closed session with the council. And I ask for that because they do reflect on the individual performance of the attorneys in the office. Lastly, we prepared our annual legislative report. I was about a month late. The attorneys got their work done on time. I couldn't. So it came out February 1st instead of December 31st, which is our goal. With the new emphasis the council's placed and with the energy that Mr. Beaudette has offered to the legislative platform, it's my sincere hope that our legislative work can convert from being reactive to being proactive. I can think of many, many areas where state legislation carried by our local representatives would be very helpful to Santa Barbara. I've been doing this for a long time, as you know. I don't believe the city plays a sufficiently proactive role in state legislation. Given our regional importance, this is a city that could hit heavier than its weight, and we're not right now. That's all I have. We're all available for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kalan. Are there questions from council? Ms. Sneddon?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you for your presentation. Just starting with questions, just more details on the workflow. So when I see the accomplishments laid out, they are substantial and significant and many. How can we see these as they are unfolding? It's a continual question I have. As a backward-looking, it's clearly very accomplished. As a forward-looking, and you have a very responsive office, I would say that as opposed to reactive. It's very responsive to the needs as they arise. But every time we want to bring something forward, we understand that something needs to drop off, but we don't know what that is or where it falls in the priorities. And my understanding to that question, too, of Monday's position is handling workflow, but then you've already described several other work priorities for that position, and it was not my understanding that though they're significant and important, that those would be the main focus of that position as being workflow. And I really want to be able to know what we're working on now as opposed to as a year back looking document. So if you could just more detail on workflow and how we can have that as a visual, that we can see the priorities, that we can see what's happening as it's happening.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Councilmember Sneddon, you are raising an issue that is not an ask. It is an ethical obligation of an attorney to keep their client regularly informed. We would be happy to report on whatever frequency you would like. That is, as I say, an ethical responsibility. I don't view it as bureaucratic. I don't view it as a burden. We attempt to get to you by email. That may not be the best medium. So basically, whatever you would like and in whatever format, we will deliver. That's our duty, and I want you to know I don't feel that as a burden or criticism. It really is an ethical obligation.
Thank you. And then, so then the looking forward, even though it's expanded from our workshop, there are 3 upcoming priority projects. I heard you in your presentation give many more than that, and I would like to support, working on the legislative recommendations. I would add to this as an accomplishment also the significant work that Dan Henschke does on water rights issues and the support for all of those regional boards that we serve on. There's in-house expertise that's going into that, and I would add that to an accomplishment. So even today, there are 3 priority projects. It seems to me there must be many more that are on this list, and I'm still not clear on what the current work projects are.
Well, this is backward-looking, and as I understand it, that's what we're trying to do when we talk about accomplishments. The 3 items that we've identified for next year were triaged by a couple of factors. One, are these projects that independently fall on the city attorney? And while you can argue that the sign ordinance involves community development, drafting a sign ordinance is hyper-technical. Mr. Doimus has agreed to pick that up and carry it forward this year. We have a law clerk coming this summer. I'm excited to say Ariel Zamora, who has moved from Public Works to law school and will be clerking for us. She'll be heavily involved in that process. The other 2 proposals are based on really direction from the city administrator, and I try to treat myself as one of the department heads that is responsible to the city administrator. And so the second 2, the streamlining and the appeal streamlining, are related to trying to manage that 4 to 5 hour a week gap that we're feeling right now in the office. So the balance that's hard to draw is between our appetite to do new and different things and our duty to drain the swamp, the alligator-infested swamp. And I would say that we've done a lot of swamp draining, but right now, it's more prudent for us to avoid taking on new assignments. Now, if you're asking for a report on what's on our plate right now, I can provide that. I'm not prepared to provide it today, but I'd be happy to give you that. I would like to do that kind of reporting collaboratively with the departments, because I would be reporting for the most part on projects that they are trying to deliver, and I would be reporting on our supportive role in delivering those.
Okay, thank you. And then what would you say, I don't know if you wanted to give a percentage to capacity for anything new. Are you full? Are you beyond capacity? Is there any capacity?
This is going to sound off kilter, but we really don't think about it that way. I've said to the council repeatedly, we'll work nights and weekends to get your needs completed. The priority question is really up to you. If you tell us to go, we go. And
I would agree with that assessment. I mean, I see you as a very responsive office. What I'm trying to do is understand, anything new comes, and then really the feeling is, well, something else will need to drop off, or people will have to work overtime, double time, weekends, and without wanting either of those, I'm just trying to get an idea of
So
needs for the future.
I understand what you're saying, and part of the work that Monday will be doing is in collaboration with the city administrator's office, preparing that workflow chart. We have that in what I would call nascent stages. In terms of why it's not done now, well, Monday started at the beginning of the year. We had a vacancy on Denny's desk, so Monday heard me say this. She was doing 3 jobs until about a month ago when Lisa Rodriguez joined the office. We've onboarded 2 new key support people in the last year, and the nurturing and development and skill training for those positions has been a significant piece of work for Monday. And that really goes back to your question about why isn't she doing the project management function? I would be happy to make that a 4th priority for the council. It is a priority for us, but when I'm faced with needing to onboard people and dealing with Mr. Way's 500 to 600 case a year criminal desk, sometimes you have to put the swamp draining activities to the side.
I so don't want this to be heard that I'm not very appreciative and complimentary of all of these accomplishments and the overworking that it takes. But that workflow is like priority number 1 and has been for several years. And thank you for filling this position. I don't see that as a 4th priority or down the line. I see that as the top of us all being informed and making sure that we're not overloading you with new priorities so that we can understand. I just want to be as clear as I can on that.
And if I might on that, the only way I can hear that is as a collaborative responsibility with the city administrator.
Then have that be how it's heard. That's fine, but it needs to happen. And another question I have is about the physical space of the attorney's office. Is it physically fully utilized, all the space that's there with the current FTEs or those proposed? Will it be at capacity, or do you have vacant space? Is that the best space for you, the physical space of where you're housed?
It's fully occupied. The problem with the space is it's not very efficiently laid out, and it would take a fair amount of money to fix that. So it's full, but there are common areas that could be reduced in size. For example, Ms. Zamora will be occupying what I would call a study carrel in the entry alcove of Suite 202. And so people will be walking back and forth past that workstation.
And it's a rented space.
It is. And that was authorized as part of the prosecution division.
Thank you.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for this presentation and for all your work. Just a brief question, it was sort of already touched on, but I'm going to follow up specifically. We talked yesterday or the day before, whenever our last meeting was, about the short-term vacation rental ordinance as well as the commercial property vacancy ordinance, whatever that looks like. And I'm wondering, I guess this goes to the question of just how this would fit in. I wanted to know if you've done an assessment of where that would fit in terms of your upcoming priorities and whether any would have to fall off, will fall off, or maybe, again, that's just a conversation for some future date, but I did want to just sort of see where those fit in and whether they should be one of these bullets or how that might work. Thank you.
We're going to be back with both ordinances on June 7th. The draft hotel ordinance and staff report are completed. The commercial vacancy ordinance is, I'm about 2/3 of the way through it.
That answers that. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
I think my questions were answered. Just a clarification on the workflow. So say there was something that we wanted to propose. Is there a way for us to contact you and then understand what's in there? And I guess this would be maybe we contact the city administrator. So just an example is this past week, it was the hotel ordinance that we're going to propose. So how would I or anybody up here find out what's on your priorities right now so we can see in there without having it to come to council with a full big report? It's like, hey, I have this idea and I want to know what's on there to whether I even want to bring it forward. And just a little clarification. I think you went into it, but I'm still a little unclear. From what I'm understanding is that your work is, Monday's position is going to be working with the city administrator to come up with a workflow and collaboration. I just want to clarify that.
The workflow is easy to report. When we meet with the departments monthly, I produce a list of current assignments out of our database. The role that is most important for Monday and me is, for lack of a better word, bird dogging to make sure it gets done. So I can produce a report for the council on demand in less than an hour of all of the assignments in the office. That's, again, part of why I responded that it's reporting to your client is an ethical responsibility, and we're equipped to do that. What is more difficult is syncing our efforts with the other departments. So I'm guilty of sometimes telling you something will be easy and not taking into account the workload in another department.
Okay, that's helpful. So there is a report you could run, and we could see what items are on there, and then make a judgment for ourselves if we want to pursue it more. And
Absolutely. I would ask that it go to the full council, and I would like it to remain confidential because many of the matters are themselves confidential.
And maybe we can talk about that, how often that gets sent to us, maybe quarterly or something like that. Just the report itself, not coming to full council, but just so we have that information if there's things that are coming up. Or as part of it, Ms. Bjork, maybe that's something we could work on, Mr. Colon, is how often we get that so we understand what you're working on.
If I might, hearing Councilmember Sneddon, quarterly is too infrequent. I think monthly makes more sense. Many councils have something they call the status of council directives that are reported back to them on a regular basis. That typically becomes an issue when people are not delivering. So as I've heard the council, since we decided to create the law practice administrator position, being timely is the critical factor. And while it's not an excuse for not reporting or not having a system, I am comfortable that we are not the slow link in the system right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And my last just comment on that is that for us, it's just important to know what you're working on, because I think it's the opposite. It's not that the work's not getting done. It's that there's always a lot of pressures on us to add things. And so it's actually the other way around. There's pressure to get
Yeah.
things done.
So
that's all I
a
have.
tremendous amount of what we do, let me elaborate. Our work list is not confined to high visibility citywide projects. We will handle everything from Ms. Connect dealing with software contract negotiations to, over the course of a year, dozens of personnel matters. And as I say, they're important and they take a lot of time, but they don't necessarily rise to something that would go on a status of council directives. So that's why I would prefer to give the council a full accounting from my office, let's say monthly, confidentially, and have a status of council directives report in collaboration with the city administrator.
All right, very good. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Are there further comments from council? Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So just comments is extremely responsive office. It is unbelievable sometimes how quickly you can turn out really quality, considered, with public input work product. And it's, I think, encouraging to us then to ask for more, which brings me back to the status of council directives. I think quarterly would be fine. My goal with that is not to overburden your office. It is not at all and should not be interpreted to be seen that I think of you as the slow link. I think of you as the incredibly responsive link. And I need to know for myself, and I think for us as a council, need to know how much you're working on. And if even if this list had come forward once in a year or mid-year, it would be, I mean, this is eye-opening to me. Like, this wow is a lot of incredible work, very responsive to the community. These are all tangible things that are for the community benefit. And thank you, truly thank you for the work that you do. I also want to say that the enforcement position, the prosecutor enforcement, anyway, what you've done, truly a public service, and it's something tangible that the public sees, feels, and are very appreciative of from the feedback that I've received. That's been, really was desperately needed, and the work that you've done there has been really appreciated for the community. And this I'm very proud of this list. I think we as a council should be proud of this list that's come forward and the work that you've done. So thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
I just want to recognize Mr. Cologne and all your staff for all the work you do in a variety of ways, from the administrative in the office to what's out there that the community is seeing the benefit of it. And I know there's been some staffing and other challenges that were serious throughout the year, and that you were able to overcome them and support your employees through difficult times and still get the work done. So I just wanted to appreciate all the staff and the work that you do to help our city function and move forward on a lot of very complex issues. So thank you.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald and Mr. Colon, and we will move on to the next item, please. Alrighty, Chief, are you leading off, or?
Operations Division, and Commander Kenny Kushner, who oversees the Strategic Operations Division, as well as our business manager, Ms. Lori Peterson. Our department has 210 total FTEs, and 142 of those are sworn. We're going to walk through, next slide, please. We're going to walk through our departmental accomplishments from the year past, our departmental objectives, lay out the departmental priorities, and then you will hear presentations on each of the divisions, as well as our, next slide, as well as our fiscal overview. Next slide, please. In reviewing our departmental accomplishments, after nearly 2 years of having the building virtually shut down, a number of employees laid off, and our patrol force directed to restrict personal contacts to the absolute minimum necessary, I'm happy to report that we're moving out of that phase of our operation. Some of the examples now include our lobby hours are open to the public approximately half of the week, and we will continue to expand those hours in the weeks ahead. We recently re-implemented the ride-along program, and we are bringing back our hourly employees, particularly our police cadets. With regards to leadership and executive development, one of my priorities during my tenure as your interim chief has been to focus on leadership development throughout the organization. This represents a cultural shift and should continue as the new chief comes on board. This happened in many organizations, beginning with the recession of 2008. One of the first areas to be cut was training. I feel this is incredibly short-sighted, and as you will see, we are making this a priority during this budget year. I've also focused on executive development for our lieutenants and commanders in several areas. Sherman Block Leadership Institute will now be a mandatory requirement for sergeants. One of our commanders will be attending the Drucker Business School next month, and my hope is that this will become an annual occurrence for some senior member of the department. Several trainings at the university and executive level have been made available that were not previously funded, and I'm very grateful to the City Administrator's Office for helping me make this a priority. With regards to the Oversight Formation Commission, as the council is aware, the police department has worked with the Oversight Commission for over 1 year. We have consistently supported oversight, and we will be returning to the council and working with the City Administrator's Office to bring back a series of recommendations to the council on June the 6th. Our alternative call response will be discussed in more detail later in this presentation. This is a transition from full service, meaning anyone calling for anything gets a response of 1 or more officers, to a more focused and purposeful response that reflects the realities of our current staffing situation. We are nearly 100% through the process of issuing body-worn cameras to our field forces. There have been some challenges with issues around storage, evidence sharing, and Public Records Act requests. And I should note that these cameras are in addition to the in-car videos that are already 100% installed in all of our marked units. The deemed approved ordinance, as the city attorney mentioned, has gone through the ordinance process. It is only now pending fee approval, and we are moving forward with that as well. And lastly, in the area of accomplishments is the co-response team. This program has been incredibly successful in terms of finding alternatives to incarcerating mentally ill people. The council appropriated funds for a second co-response position, and we are waiting for the county to make a clinician available in order to fill that second team. I recently had a very positive meeting with Behavioral Wellness Director, Dr. Tony Navarro, who's new to her position. One of the things that we focused on is deploying these units on a regional basis in collaboration with the Sheriff's Office, focusing on the best possible dates and times. I would point out that this program does not necessarily need to be a 24/7 operation. Next slide, please. Our objectives for the upcoming fiscal year Obviously, the first priority is staffing. It remains our number one challenge. You will see some specifics later in this presentation about the issues we are dealing with. I think one of the most critical aspects is that we are not losing people, although we are not losing people at a greater rate than years past, we are losing them for different reasons. We are having trouble replacing people due to the limited number of applicants who are coming forward. We are taking very concrete steps to increase the number of our professional staff and to diversify our workforce. The transition and the process for onboarding the permanent chief of police is well underway and it's on schedule. And hopefully that process will be completed by early to mid-June. I mentioned leadership and executive development earlier. I mentioned this earlier, but I don't think it can be overstated. One of the things you will see in this year's budget is a proposal to remove a sworn officer position and transfer those funds to services and supplies so that we can adequately fund both our leadership and technical development training, as well as creating a separate budget for recruitment efforts. And of course, we will continue to work on finalizing the oversight model, as I mentioned. I do want to enhance the role of professional staff. In this year's budget, you will see an expansion of the number of police technicians. These are non-sworn professional staff who fill critical positions in dispatch, the Detective Bureau, and my hope is that within the year, we will have units deployed in the field to take reports that do not involve named suspects. Our department is currently at about 32% professional staff, and as I'll talk about a little bit later, I believe over the next few years, this will expand to approximately 50% would be my hope. Next slide, please. And this is just a reminder of the 4 departmental priorities that we shared with this council last year: improving the quality of life in neighborhoods, transforming the mission of patrol, our internal procedural justice, our employee wellness, and obviously recruitment and retention. And the 2 commanders will talk in more detail about both of these, and I'll start with Commander Mary Linda Arroyo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. I want to start by saying it is truly a privilege to serve my hometown. I graduated from elementary school, junior high, and Santa Barbara High School, so it really, truly is a privilege. We have some of the best police officers in the state of California, or if not the country, and it is an honor to be in the leadership role with them. I started serving the community over 30 years ago as a part-time employee as a cadet, and it's truly a privilege to bring back the cadet program because those are going to be the leaders in the future. You see this slide. It's a culmination of a lot of the different things that we do, but we truly deliver preventive measures. Next slide. You heard the chief talk about transforming the mission of patrol. It all starts with emergency response. It is a collective approach, and we look at metrics of community success, not just numbers. We've created new categories and consolidated others as we do the response model. Next slide. What is the alternative response? Again, on the left side, it starts with that emergency response, but it's truly triaging in our dispatch center. How best can we serve that community member that is calling for some type of service from the police department? It does not start with just sending an officer. There may be alternatives of phone reports, online, or other ways to get the service that they need. As the chief has said, our police technicians hopefully will be able to respond in the field for some of these things. Next slide. You've heard a lot about our response times and our P3 goals, and this is our priority 1 through 4 calls for service types. Priority 1's being in progress or may result in injury or death, to priority 4 being cold investigations. We have reported these for 25 plus years. Our goals have always remained the same, with priority 1's being 7 minutes or less from the call for service coming in, to all the way to priority 4 being 50 minutes is our goal to get there and provide that service. The blue on this marks the 3-year average prior to the pandemic. The orange shows during the pandemic time, and the red shows our current average after going to the alternative response. And I'm very proud to say that all of the officers and dispatchers have combined for the first time in 20-plus years to meet all of our goals in all 4 priorities. Next slide. And I emphasize on each slide the emergency response. Just on Wednesday, the H. Thomas Gary Awards were given out for valor. 3 of your Santa Barbara police officers were awarded this highest honor. H. Thomas Gary is a police officer that was killed in the line of duty in the 70s. So it is an extreme honor to say his name and to honor the valor of these officers. These officers went into a burning house on the east side and pulled out a citizen that was trapped in the house. This video camera footage that you will see is from Officer Davina Valerio. She is on the job for 5 days. This is her 5th day on the job as a Santa Barbara police officer. She's with her FTO, Officer Cristina Ortega. This is after they've already pulled the citizen out. They went back to the house to confirm that nobody else was in the house adjacent to it. There is no audio on this, but I want you to see how fully engulfed this house was. It's not just the flames you see at the beginning, it's towards the end. You will see what they came across. And it ends with Officer Adrian Gutierrez, who you see also assisted with saving that citizen. It's Officer Adrian Gutierrez, Officer Cristina Ortega, and Officer Davina Valerio, who are awarded the H. Thomas Gary Award for Valor. Officer Adrian Gutierrez has 20-plus years of service, and again, Officer Davina Valerio had 5 days. Next slide. The other thing that we focus on in field operations and at the department and citywide is reduction of harm. Since fiscal year 2019, all City of Santa Barbara police officers are trained and are given Narcan to deploy in the field. In 2019, we had 8 deployments. This year, FY22, which we still have 2 months of the fiscal year, we've had 121 deployments. To put this in perspective, in 2021, the Santa Barbara County had 133 overdose deaths in the county. I'm sorry, 133. 37 of those were for the City of Santa Barbara jurisdiction. We unfortunately lead that in jurisdictions. Half of those were from fentanyl. I cannot tell you how many of these 121 deployments resulted in saving someone's life, but I can guarantee you they did. Next slide, we have transitioned to the National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS. You will no longer hear about UCRs. However, we will compare it so that you have some kind of comparison. The most important thing that you need to hear is that crime is going to appear to go up somewhat significantly because we go from reporting 10 offenses to 52 offenses. We go from reporting one of the hierarchy, the most highest level offense, to recording up to 10 offenses per incident. This will give better data, and hopefully we'll be able to report some things that would delve into the different data and clearance rates. Next slide. This is a depiction of the various different field activities from field operations and otherwise. In the center of the circle, you'll see our community liaisons. They are currently deployed into our field operations and into patrol teams to go to those emergency responses because of our numbers. We are always going to provide that. And I think that it's always apropos to show that the 43 minutes is the average time per officer, per call for service in the City of Santa Barbara. I will now proudly turn this over to my fellow commander, Commander Kushner.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Well, I didn't go to elementary school here. I did move here for UCSB, and I'm one of those people that never left. So it is an honor to serve here. And One question I do ask myself occasionally is what's kept me here, and I won't go on and on about that, but I will summarize it by saying it's a quality of people that I get to work with and inspire me, and the support I feel from the community and that we enjoy. There's an infographic up on the screen, and I will not go into every detail on it, but I will speak specifically to a few items. One of which you'll see in the upper left-hand portion is our homicides for FY '22. Of those, one of them represents a vehicular homicide, another was a murder-suicide, and two were murders that were solved very quickly with swift arrests. And these arrests were done by our investigative division working collaboratively with our patrol division. One thing that is definitely something that we're very aware of on the investigative side is technology. And with technology, there's two components. One is the quickly changing and evolving aspects of it, and I'm talking about social media and cell phones. And the other is the labor involved in utilizing those for investigation. So that's something that provides both a challenge and an opportunity. Commander Arroyo brought up the opioid crisis. Our department has joined Project Opioid. This is being led by the Sheriff's Department. There was a media release on it the day before yesterday. And what this represents is a collaborative with all stakeholders, including the faith community, including education, and other law enforcement partners. The police department's role with this is going to be taking actions to reduce that number that we just discussed, which is overdose deaths. The enforcement that we would look at doing is going to involve targeting distributors and traffickers, not simply users and those that are experiencing the overdoses. Next slide, please. I'm going to take a moment and just talk about employee wellness. In the law enforcement profession, it's certainly a job where there is a high level of stress and exposure to different tragedies. And tragedies, I'm referring to major accidents, death of children, and all the other things that we experience often on some of the worst moments of people's lives. We're there with them. And so that trauma does take a toll, and there is a physical and mental consequence. In response to that, our department has established an on-site counseling space that does get utilized, and I think it's very beneficial. It helps normalize the need for counseling, and it makes it easily and makes it accessible. And the other item I'll speak briefly on is our Healthy Warrior meal program, and that is a program where in our break room, 24/7, we have access to prepared meals, and this is a private public partnership where our employees are able to pay for these meals, and something that has become actually a model that other agencies have followed. Next slide, please. Here you'll see our recruitment card that we hand out for prospective employees. Right now we have a sergeant that's dedicated full-time to recruitment, and also a cadre of officers that are involved in that. I'll get into a little bit of that down the line here. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of information on this infographic. I'm going to start on the topic of police officer recruitment by talking about the applications. And the chief referenced earlier our number one challenge right now being staffing. And within that number one challenge, it is attributed to recruitment. I'll talk about attrition later and losing officers, but right now I'm going to talk about our recruitment. As you can see on the left side under applications, there's the number of applications submitted to be a police officer with our agency since 2017. And this steady decline is something that's created quite a challenge. Now, it isn't something that's unique to the Santa Barbara Police Department. This is a phenomenon that's nationwide, but nevertheless, it's something that is a problem for us that we're working through currently. Looking at this roadway depiction that shows the path someone takes from applying to be a police officer all the way to get into the academy, I'd like to draw your attention to the written exam and the 22% number that's in red. That number actually represents, for all the applications we received for police officer, 22% of those show up and actually continue the process. They take the written exam and continue. So the application number is important, but the numbers that follow are even more important because those are the people that show up. The next number that I'd like to speak on is reviews of the PHS. That's the personal history statement. That's another step in our process where to continue past there, only 14% of total applicants make it past that. And that's once they've provided additional information that helps us understand if they're able to continue and go further in the process. And then last is the number 1 to 3%. 1 to 3% is the percentage of people who we actually hire and send to the academy based on the number of applications. The right-hand column there is the number hired, and I would point out, in case anybody's trying to do math on whether they line up, it is a trailing, rolling number, so the people that we hire in 2022 will be applications from 2021 and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So this is our numbers on attrition, and this is something I'm going to speak in a little bit of detail on and really want to direct attention towards the categories for officers that are leaving, not for the reason of retirement, but for leaving the profession altogether, and also choosing to leave our fine agency for another law enforcement department. That number, that column rather, in 2020 and 2021, as you can see, has gone up. Our average attrition for officers year over year for the 6-year average is about 14. Right now, looking at what I can best forecast for 2022, I anticipate a high number. I anticipate it to be on the higher side of all of those numbers, if not surpassing them altogether. Currently, out of our 142 positions, we have 20 that are vacant, and we have 7 recruits that are in the academy. Next slide, please. Functional strength is the number of officers that we have available at any given time to show up to work and be able to go on calls for service. This pie chart here shows where we're at with the current staffing that we have. I'll add some numbers to them so that they have a little more meaning other than the percentages. For full duty personnel, it's shown at 69%. That accounts for 98 sworn personnel. In looking at the vacancies, I just referenced those, and those are 20 positions. At the academy, we have 8, which accounts for 7 that are in training, and we have 1 officer that's assigned there as a recruit training officer. Our injured and other is 11 officers. And the 3% there in green, those are officers that are actually assigned in dispatch. And with staffing challenges in dispatch, we backfill those with police officers, and that gives us the ability to answer all the 911 calls. And the only comment I'll make on functional strength before we move forward is, in order to keep the adequate personnel in the field, we have had to reduce our specialty units and take a good portion of them out of their positions and put them on beats so that they can respond to emergency calls and to routine calls. Next slide, please. So looking at a hiring plan, the chief spoke on a proposal to have funds that are utilized specifically for recruitment at $20,000. We anticipate having access to those funds, that we would be utilizing those for increased job fairs to be in person, and increased social media presence and other advertising techniques. Right now, to To supplement some of the work that needs to be done, we've added police technician positions, which have been very valuable. The chief spoke on those. And we look forward to relaunching our cadet program. I was also a cadet, and a lot of people who have been in our cadet program have gone on to various positions at the police department. Finally, the Santa Barbara City College, we've had meetings with the college about creating a dispatch certification program where students could receive training that would lead to having them be ready to come into the police department to work in our dispatch center. And also, we were invited to a program at the Santa Barbara City College called Latinas in Law Enforcement, where some of our personnel, including Commander Arroyo, presented multiple times, and that led to some really positive interactions and potential interest in various jobs at the department. I would like to now turn it over to Business Manager Lori Peterson. Thank you.
Next slide. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Lori Peterson, and I'm the business manager at the Police Department. I've been an employee of the City of Santa Barbara for just under 30 years. I've been with the Police Department for 10 years. The total budget for the department for fiscal year 2023 is $55.7 million. And of that expense, we provide $4.3 million of our own revenue to help support the department. That leaves the general fund with a $51 million support. As we go through this, I'll first be discussing our revenues, and then I'll move on to some proposed fee changes, and then on to our expenses. Next slide, please. The first slide I'm showing today is just kind of a larger picture of the information that was provided on OpenGov in the very beginning slides, and it was just a little hard to read, so I kind of made it a little bit bigger to show all the different areas that the revenue for the police department come from. The majority, as you can see, is departmental revenue, which is parking citations, taxi permits, other various permits, live scans. So the services that we provide in the community and those that they pay for. The Traffic Safety Fund is state monies that come to us through the county on a quarterly basis. The SLESF and COPS funding is, again, some state funds that are directed to us from the county and is paid on a quarterly basis. The Asset Forfeiture Fund is a fund that is comprised of both live scan and anti-auto theft monies, and these monies are generated or come in from the DMV registration fees that are paid for vehicles. And then also within that fund, we also have actual asset forfeiture or seized monies related to criminal activity that are then processed. We have an equipment fund that is used to fund our mobile data computer systems, our MDCs in the vehicles, and that's set aside each year to increase a value so that we can make a purchase at the time that the equipment needs to be replaced. So it's an accumulative fund. And then we have some other various revenues. We have a local agency agreement for data sharing with Ventura PD, and so that brings in a small portion as well. Next slide, please. On this slide, the breakdown of our revenues is by type of money coming in. So it looks just a little bit differently. It's based on the categories such as taxes, fees, and fines, whether they're interlocal government transfers or are they other revenues. And the key things on this slide are just showing that, again, this is probably the 8th year in a row that I've brought forward that our departmental revenues are continuing to decline. They were not as great as in prior years, but we do anticipate still some slight impact from COVID and its impact on services over the last couple years. So we've adjusted fees and fines at the top for that. We also continue to see that taxi permits and taxi driver permits just aren't performing as they used to, most likely due to Uber and Lyft type of ride services. And so we've made reductions there. And then in the last one, there is the fingerprinting that we provide the public, and we have to receive the monies that go to the Department of Justice for that scan, and then we just pay that back out. So it's basically a pass-through, and we're just not seeing the activity as much as we were in prior years. So in total, that's a $232,000 reduction. Next slide, please. So the next section I'm going to talk about are some proposed fee changes that we have. Next slide. The first one is, as the chief had mentioned, the deemed approve is moving forward, and we're proposing to add in at this point the regulatory fee, which would then help offset the expense of a full-time police coordinator in its expenses. It would be allocated across approximately 145 establishments, and that represents about a $970 a year fee for those businesses. Next slide. The other fee that we're proposing has existed in the police department fee schedule in the past. We are just adding the ability to charge for commanders and lieutenants who are required to be at special events. And these are oftentimes the events that are just like marathons, where they're very impactful to the city and require additional staff support. We're also making an adjustment on the rates for sergeant and officer fees for overtime, so we recoup more of that. On the next section, you can see here, these are the department-specific expenses that we have, with the majority being for $45.5 million in salaries and benefits, a small chunk of $2.9 million of allocated costs, and then our supplies and services budget, which is at about $3.1 million. We do have a little bit in something called non-capital equipment. Again, that's where we have our computer, our MDCs in the cars, and software that comes out of that. Next slide, please. Here's a chart of the fee of the categories broken down, and the key components here, again, in response to reduced revenues, we made an adjustment in our supplies and services in about $133,000. Part of that was also due to the cancellation of a contract for services we no longer need, so that was convenient to have that. We also have down at the bottom our reduction target of $337,000, and I'll speak to how we're accomplishing that in another slide. And also on here, just wanted to point out that the new police building is in our budget, but is not a project that we're managing, but it is reflected here as a expense for us. Next slide, please. So for the next year, our budget strategy is to hold open 4 officer positions in order to fund the police technician positions that have been discussed. So we've started that this year and have some employees in place, and we're continuing to look for qualified candidates for those. And then we're continuing that forward into fiscal year 2023. We're also proposing for our budget reduction target that we continue to hold open 2 officer positions in order to have that meet our reduction target. And then, as the chief had mentioned before, we are proposing today to eliminate 1 entry-level police officer position in order to fund our supplies and services area, specifically in the area of training and recruitment. And so that would be a change going forward for year after year with the commitment to that training. Next slide, please. I will, at this point, hand it off to the chief.
Thank you, Lori, and thanks, commanders. And just close real quickly, I would want the council to know that I too started as a cadet, but nearly 50 years ago. So I'm a big proponent of that program. With regards to the future of policing, I alluded to a couple of these. I think you'll see a greater percentage of professional staff, particularly in the area of police technicians and dispatchers performing duties that don't necessarily need to be handled by armed officers. This will probably result in fewer sworn officers, and they will have more clearly defined duties. I think there will be even stronger partnerships than we already have with outside entities and organizations. And I think there will be a stronger oversight role for the Fire and Police Commission going forward. Next slide. keep talking about staffing just because it certainly is the most critical issue, but we're going to shift our focus over the long haul to local recruiting, particularly looking at City College and UCSB. We've mentioned some of the programs with City College, and I won't repeat them, but I do think that bringing people on board, whether it's as dispatchers, police techs, cadets, or whatever, it actually creates a pool for police officers, because it allows people an entry level into the police world without actually being officers, and helps them decide, is this something I want to do going forward. I believe that recruitment is going to remain a challenge for the foreseeable future. And one reminder, and this for the council, is that the department, like a lot of the city staff, is a commuter agency. We've actually improved from last year. We're at about 34% of people who live on the South Coast, that is between Carpinteria and Gaviota, and that is up from last year. But ultimately, we're trying to answer the question for everybody that works in the police department, why do I want to drive to Santa Barbara? And creating those incentives, I think, is going to be important. The bigger question is not going to be, in the future, I believe, not how many officers do we have, but what or how many services can we deliver, and do we want to deliver? Next slide, please. Some of the fiscal challenges going forward, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty about future costs. We've already seen fuel costs go up dramatically this year in a way that we did not predict. And equally important, there's uncertainty about future mandates. The different things coming down from Sacramento and from Washington with regards to increased training, equipment requirements, et cetera, and all of these come with a price tag of some point. One of the things that I've certainly been critiqued over the years, most notably by Attorney General Eric Holder one time, when I said that no one ever does more with less, which is a very common phrase. People do less of the same. And so as we make these decisions about what is the nature of our workforce and how many people should be in that workforce, we are making decisions about services. But we will have to redefine how that gets done. Police service delivery will change, and as a society, we will answer two basic questions. What is the role of the police in our society, and what is the role of the police in Santa Barbara? Next slide. Before I stop and open the discussion for any questions and the comments that you may have, I do want to take this public opportunity to say to this council, to the men and women of the Santa Barbara Police Department, and to the public that it has been my privilege to serve as your interim police chief for the last 16 months. This is an incredibly fine organization and a fine city, and you are well served by the men and women who work here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chief. To the council for questions. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for that really informative presentation. Thank you all for that informative presentation. I had a question about the officers who have left the department. Is there an exit interview that's done when that happens, and do we know the reasons as to why they feel like they're leaving or they had to leave?
Councilmember Gutierrez and council, there is an exit interview. I personally interview every employee that says that they're leaving, and there are other interviews that occur before the people get to me. The people who are leaving the profession, in several cases, are actually moving out of state. They've made decisions that housing is too expensive. They especially if they're raising a young family, there's a lot of concerns about two-income earners, and if they can go someplace else where only one person needs to work. That seems to be an item for discussion. The people who are going to other agencies, in many cases, were those commuter officers that I referred to who have made decisions to go to work someplace closer to home. And I think when we did the State of the Policing presentation in January, I told you it was, for me, it was one of the most dramatic examples. A young officer who had been here for about 2 years and was really a superb performer, but she had been commuting from Glendale for 2 years. And she finally made a decision to take a position with the Glendale Police Department, which is very hard to argue with. So that seems to be this issue of quality. I think a lot of people are making quality of life decisions. It's not so much disillusionment with the department per se, or even the profession per se, but individuals asking themselves, what do I want my life to look like?
Thank you, that's good to know. I often question whether it is a situation of the funding or if it's a cultural issue or anything like that, but I feel like your response answered that. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Well, thank you. First, Chief, I just want to thank you for being here a second year. I know you didn't plan on it, but thank you for the great year that you've had in the department, and thank you to all your department and the presentation today. So just a couple questions. On the switch to the new data reporting and the metrics, it caught me when you said that it may appear that crime is rising because of that, because of the new data. So the way new data is captured. So how are we doing outreach to the public, but in particular the media as well, so they are aware of this and so the media can report on it accurately?
So I'm going to tread carefully here because we're going to get too far into technology, and I will give you vague answers that make no sense. But Commander Arroyo is probably very capable of answering detailed questions. I will say we do intend to do public outreach, and we intend to start with this council, partly to do a much more in-depth presentation to explain about what this is, because it is important to know that the incidents aren't going up, but the way the incidents are being counted is being changed, and the initial impact is likely to look very, very dramatic. So there will be public education, and there will be a presentation to council when we're in a position to launch this. And I don't recall the exact sort of launch. Within 3 to 6 months, we'll be back to talk about this.
And so it'd be next year that we would start to come back, that we would have more data that, not quite a full year, but getting pretty close. So that's going to be the time, is getting into early next year where you're going to start seeing those changes.
That's correct. And one of the things we've talked about is the importance of sort of double counting for a year or two. So we can say, this is what it was under the old system, this is what it is now, at least until we're in the second year of NIBRS, and we can now start comparing NIBRS to NIBRS versus UCR.
Okay, perfect. And okay, just a shift over to follow up on the retention and recruitment. I'm pleased that we have the new advertisement. We're working with UCSB and City College, and as well as the cadet program. But are there any additional elements that are under our control in terms of the profession? And you mentioned some of them are just the profession in general. People are leaving it, or they don't live in the area, such as Glendale. But are there any things that we could do as a city, as in your department, that are in our control that we can modify? It seems like we are with the cadets and trying to move locally, but anything else that we're looking at?
I think one of the things we're going to look at in great detail is the whole area of incentives and how to keep people here. What can we do about that? There's discussion underway about that. But I think in the short term, it's answering the question about why do I want to drive here, and that's where the incentives are. The long-term solution, I really do believe, is that local recruitment focus, and really trying to find a way to bring people who are already here into the pipeline, because the people who are here, they know the area, they want to stay here, they're motivated to stay here. I've heard Commander Kushner, I've heard other people talk about the fact that they came to UCSB and they never left, and we want people who have gone to UCSB or gone to City College to come to the police department and say after 20 or 30 years that they never left.
Okay. And I assume the same is true for, because I noticed on the dispatchers where we have sworn officers in there, so it's the same types, is it the same types of issues with dispatchers? Because is there a lack of qualified individuals or certified individuals, however you want to name it, that are dispatchers, and are we having trouble recruiting them, or what can we do to increase the technical staff that we have, such as dispatchers?
Well, I will say publicly thank you to this council because you very recently approved a salary adjustment for dispatch supervisors, and we went from 0 applications to 6 almost as soon as that salary change was posted. Recruiting dispatchers is incredibly difficult. We lost one this week who had been commuting from Santa Maria and who just took a job as a dispatcher with San Luis Obispo, which means she's cut her commute in half. Recruiting dispatchers is actually harder in some ways than recruiting police officers. It's an incredibly complex job. It's incredibly difficult. And the training program is particularly demanding. And there's going to be some interesting challenges over the next couple of years as the proposed county regional fire dispatch comes online and the fire dispatching, medical dispatching element moves out of our dispatch center. That's slated to take place, I think, hopefully 2024. So we'll have to see what that looks like. But I think the salary adjustment is going to make a huge difference.
Thank you.
All right, very good. I've got just one question before we go to public comment. Chief, you talked about the situation with deploying with Narcan, the amount of overdose deaths and all that. Do we currently have, do PD have any programs with youth prevention programs that they participate in for drug prevention, substance abuse prevention?
Other than the work the CLOs do with the schools, I don't believe that we do. I think most of the youth programs, including the Explorer posts and some of the officers on campus and some of the things that we used to do, those have simply gone away.
No, thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. We will then go to comments from council. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you to our officers here today. I think just to acknowledge that these have been incredibly challenging times for a variety of reasons, nationally, pandemic, social justice issues, and you have risen to the occasion every time. You didn't create these issues or problems, but you've certainly been responsive to them. In the broader solutions, you were already employing 21st century policing and then took the challenge that was presented to you and did even more and didn't flinch, frankly, to rising to that challenge. I want to really thank you for that. And the community also thanks you for that, and that you're continuing to explore further advancements, further ways to respond to these community needs and to what's being asked of you in these particularly difficult times. You really are leaders, and I'm really happy that that was part of the presentation for not just being a fine police department, but also one that other departments look to and how to handle these issues. And I think it was difficult to be continually asked to do more when you were already doing so much. And I think we've reached the point now where collaboratively with the community, understanding what is already in place and what is further to come. So I want to thank you for that. Just really highlighting significant improvements in not just response rates, but transforming how we respond with the co-response and with the continued emphasis on not using force and in who's responding to which situations. And I think these open, collaborative communications have really highlighted what it is that the department is doing that I think was maybe not so highlighted before. And even with body cameras, that was something that was already in play, the wanting to move forward with that. And then the video that we saw today accomplishes what I would hope that body cameras or police oversight or anything would accomplish, where we're seeing more of police activity, that it highlights how much is good. And we don't, as a public, see that unless we're right in there and sort of in your business in a way that maybe we weren't used to before. Some issues of support. I'm really supporting recruiting locally. We have a unique community, and members of our community who are recruited locally understand how we are a mutually respectful community and how we want policing to happen and sort of the culture of our community. I support creating opportunities to promote from within. I'm happy to see you naming that out, that's been lacking, and I am really hoping in the future that our positions, the priority is on recruitment from within. We should be growing our own, appreciating our own, keeping our own, and that's all part of community policing also. I do support community policing, and it's essential that our officers can live here, know our community, work in our community, and not just serve the community, but also be served by the community in terms of input and responsiveness and understanding what the community needs are. Our recent newly sworn officers, what an impressive group of officers, and thank you. You continue to set the bar high, and because of that, we maybe don't have as many numbers, but I have such confidence in the officers that we have, and that setting the bar so high benefits the whole community as well, and serves as an example. And really, just to say again, I did not mention also supporting co-response and the on-site counseling. I'm sorry I was late. I just came from a 3-day conference with City College on trauma-informed response and how if we don't take care of our own individual trauma, we can't be there to help other people in their trauma. And as you mentioned, you're interfacing with the community on their worst days. And the importance of the trauma work that you're doing and the counseling in-house is essential to be able to serve the community in their times of need as well. And just to name again the Thomas Gary Ward of Valor and the 3 officers, Valeria, Ortega, and Gutierrez, it's gratifying to see that even when you said that 5 days in serving and already ready to literally go into a burning building to save lives. And that's the police department we have. That's the culture that you're cultivating and bringing forward. And I just wanted to say that you may not always receive the message from us, but I really want to say that we value you and want to say that as often as possible. And thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Again, just want to say thank you to all of our police officers and all your support staff and technical staff for the job you're doing, and supportive of the going forward that you have here with the fees. Grateful that the off-sale alcohol ordinance is going forward. I'm looking to see the results of that. And then, in particular, I appreciate the attention to recruitment, even though there's a lot of factors that are out of control, that you have a plan and you're implementing measures to try to address it through a variety of ways that are within our control. And that, for example, bring the cadet program back and looking at UCSB and hiring locally in City College. So, again, just really appreciate all the work that you're doing. There's a lot of challenges out there, but you come every day and you're here for the city. So thank you for the presentation today.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can be very brief. I just want to associate myself with the comments of my colleagues and publicly express my appreciation. We, as they both said, ask you to do a whole heck of a lot, obviously with ever more limited circumstances financially, people power. So really, thank you for all that you do. We appreciate it.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To keep it brief, I just want to thank you and all the officers for doing what you do, and also to you, Chief, specifically. You've been very transparent, and you humor me in my questions, and I appreciate that. It says a lot about you as a leader, and yeah, very much appreciative. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, good presentation, Chief and all. I echo Commander Arroyo's words when it talks about the quality of the people that are here. I've always taken a lot of pride in our department. The co-response team, the community policing, everything that we've done, we are a model agency. We have been for years, and I think it's really coming to culmination right now. But I was a little discouraged to hear that we're gonna not have quite as many sworns, because that was something that was always a focus of mine when I was on council, to maximize that. But if the chief's got a strategy, I'm gonna go with it. I think that's the way to go. I think if we come up with, you say, like a lot of departments have a much higher percentage of professional staff. I'll be very interested to hear what their authority limits and duties will be compared to what a sworn officer will be. As I said before, I've never, ever heard anyone in this community say, we've got too many cops. But I'm gonna be, I'm really counting on there being even an enhanced presence with our sworn staff being out there. So yeah, I think that's about all I've got. So anybody else, any other comments? So that will let these guys go back to work. A lot of money sitting right there. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.